excited to be here. This is the first episode of Masterclass Fridays. This is a whole series of masterclasses that we will have with the best artists in the space. And we're so excited today to have AOI team, Rik Oostenbroek, and Azura as well, one of their collectors. Thank you for being here and taking the time with us today. I think we can start a little bit because, as we were saying, this is the first episode, and this is also the first session that we've got in our brand new Discord server. So we kind of wanted to give a warm welcome to everyone who's in the Discord server and that joined us in the last couple of days as well. I wanted to let Letitia go through a little bit of the Discord and all of the amazing features that we've got.
Okay. So, most of you guys have probably explored the Discord so far. So we are opening up as we go along. We've got tons of stuff already in store for you guys, and we're just waiting for, let's say, the vibes to take off. We're talking to you guys every day. Basically, we hit the ground running. I don't think we wasted a second. And the contest is going on, the Don't Panic competition. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. There's amazing stuff in that channel. You really, really, really want to get familiarized as well. We have an amazing section called Intros. And in that, you can read up on your fellow members, on your colleagues, on your fellow creators, collectors, and curators. You all chose a role. If you haven't done so, I kind of screen a little bit. And I know there's about 5 people that haven't chosen their role yet. You should be able to do that in due time. So you can get to know each other. The intros are so amazing. It's really inspiring to get to know everybody. So have a look in there. Obviously, we are excited to be talking to you guys every day, all day. And AOI complete what I'm going to say here, but the Discord is really designed to be a place where you guys can share amongst each other with artists that are at the top of the game right now, just as Rik here, together with collectors to find answers, to find solutions, to discuss, to bring the space to another level, to really create a community that can together construct and build a future for the art on internet in general that should be even more brighter than it is today. So this ambition is what drives every decision that we're making in terms of the Discord, but it's also a collaboration. So if you guys have any ideas, if you want to participate, if you want to join the Discord team, if you want to help the community sort of grow together, then please raise your hand, make yourself known. So we're excited to grow the Discord. There is going to be a lot more material in the Discord. There is obviously a host of events. This is the inaugural Masterclass Fridays, very special one. And you will be able to join us here every Friday. So that's an important piece, I would say. And there will be more events, obviously, coming up where we're having a gazillion ideas a second. But do share if you do have needs, ideas, anything that you feel is important for the community. Obviously, it's supposed to be for you and therefore also by you. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you for the amazing introduction. AOI, do you wanted to add something on the Discord? How do you feel about having a new Discord?
You know what? Like in the world of Web3, I think Discord is an incredible place for artists to really sort of gel and vibe in a space. And I think our first Discord, when we first built it, we were experimenting with a lot of sort of focus for artists, and we wanted to cater to all the different artists. And by this next iteration, we're like, you know what, just having artists is amazing, right? But without collectors, without curators, without the melting pot of sort of trio of people that really drive the space forward, it's not as exciting. So we created this new Discord, like Letitia and Federica were saying, it is designed for artists and curators and collectors to really communicate, share ideas. Like eventually we wanted to be a place that you can drop in at any time and just say hello and have someone who's in a similar path to you, depending on whether it's an artist or not. I just saw a question in the stream saying, how does AOI's plan to support young artists? And that's a very interesting thing because Rick was saying before, we are in a little bit of a so-called bear market, but bear market in terms of crypto. So I think if you look at the art world doesn't stop. It doesn't matter if the markets are crashing or anything like that. The art market is full stage. I think it shouldn't be affected by what happens in the world. So I definitely think this is just beginnings of the AI Discord, but hopefully as each channel opens, we can open up more sort of discussion and really help drive more exposure to new artists, to artists that are non-NFT based but want to get into the space. We hope this is the place that can be and be happy in.
Absolutely. And also to add on that, the project of the AOI streams includes a lot of artists that are not necessarily super famous or popular yet, but we see a big future for them, and we know that they will become the artists of the future. So if everyone that's here in the Discord server right now, if you want to join us in the AOI streams, like all of our Twitter spaces as well, you'll be able to get to know a little bit more about, young artists as well, and a lot of other projects that we are doing to include more and more people from the traditional world as well. So yeah, thank you for this amazing question. I actually would like to continue on this line because For also asked what inspires the collection AOI has now. So what kind of inspirations do you have for what you usually collect? Is there any key elements that you look for?
This is a really, really interesting question. And I think to answer it, we have to go back a year and a half ago, 2 years, when the NFT market first began. There was really no community. There was no really Discord. There wasn't a lot of these sort of new age components that people think about as an NFT project. So right at the beginning, I remember my first experience on Super Rare, it was just scrolling. You know what I mean? I would just hop on Super Rare. I would scroll and I would stop and be like, oh my God, this is really, really amazing. So I'm slightly different. I got into sensation. So on the very first level, it's, does this work stop me in my tracks? Does this work make me go, wow, who made this? So the first would be that sort of attraction. Second, I like to look at, who the artist is, how the artist sort of engages with the community. Because NFTs, unlike traditional art, there's a huge community aspect now, right? There's Twitter, as soon as you buy an NFT, the artist straight away can somehow reach out to you. And the next minute you're chatting with the artist and the artist community starts chatting with you. So these days, when you buy a piece of art, you're meeting new friends, you're meeting new collectors, and I think that's what sets the space up very different from contemporary art or even a lot of the traditional art. Most of the artists probably don't even exist anymore. Whereas now, right, you've got all these artists that are super friendly. And to be honest, some of the most successful artists I've seen in the last year and a half, sure, the art is amazing and all sort of stuff, right? But there's that element of almost social interaction. There's that element of, actually, maybe you could call it performance art in a way. But some of the best artists you've seen, these guys are quite big personalities. They're really, really good at engaging the community and people that they don't know. And I think that's important. So the third part, I would say, as the NFT world grows, right, we've seen in the last year and a half, we went through a stage where there was tons and tons of PFP projects. Crazy one-on-ones were selling for millions of dollars. Some of these so-called art funds were just buying up things like crazy, right? And when that happens, right, you start to see sort of people that are not really in it for the art. You start to see people that do it just to, take money out of the ecosystem. So at that moment in time, it's very hard for up and coming and very talented artists to really break through. Because to be honest, when you first start minting works, right, an artist might, they might mint one piece, might mint another piece, maybe they mint a third piece, but then if they mint 3 pieces and none of them sell, they're probably not going to mint more pieces. But if you look at traditional art and you look at some of the biggest names, these guys have created 20,000, 30,000 pieces. So I would say that now, because the market's not as crazy, there's less scammers or people that want to rip money out of the ecosystem. We're starting to see people launch on different chains. So I would say, Tezos allows people to launch things a lot cheaper. So the artists are able to launch multiples of works and hundreds of works, and sell them for probably a lot cheaper than what's on Ethereum. But because of that, right, then they're able to build a community faster. Artists that mint on Super Rare, I find, even some of the earliest guys in 2018, those guys, in a way, haven't minted that many projects. Even X copied the example, right? He started minting in 2018. But when he started in 2018, he hasn't actually minted that many pieces of art on Super Rare. But in a way, you do need to keep minting. You do need to build up that community, that sort of following. But most of all, I think, if an artist is having fun and really enjoying the process and meeting new friends on the way, it shows on their Twitter. And that for me is energy. And then that leads me to Rik's work. The first time I saw Rik's work, I was breathless. I was just like, who made this? This is incredible. This is just mind blowing. And it was quite funny because I was attracted to his work, but I never bought his work, right? So Rik kept making pieces and they're all amazing, but I never bought any of his pieces. And I've always wanted to. And then until a few weeks ago where he created Self, people were like, why didn't you buy any of other Rik's pieces? And you know what? I feel like Rik's pieces are sensorial. There is something splendid. It's a form of energy. His ability to harness a certain energy just with color and movement. And I think that's something that's super, super unique. And with Self, right, that piece in particular was all the brilliance of Rik, but that told his journey as an artist. And for me, right, that kind of captured the whole essence of what's happening in the world of NFTs, right? Look at PFPs. Why are people buying PFPs? a piece, right? They represent identity, they represent whatever they want to represent. And I kind of felt like with Rick's particular piece itself, this was a piece that, if you saw on his Twitter as well, right? He went through so many iterations. And to me, when an artist goes through so many iterations and you understand, why do they go through these iterations? You start seeing from just that beautiful image of a face, you start seeing all the layers that make up who the artist is, their journey, their story, their life. And to me, to have a piece in a collection that represents an artist's journey and soul, that to me is something that is extremely powerful. Sorry if I went too long.
No, not at all. I was actually reflecting on this, and I keep pushing my argument that collecting art is an art in itself. And I think that it does really reflect who you are as a person as well. And so I always see collections as a combination of little pieces of one person, right? And I like that you were mentioning that it's a lot about energy for you, and that you knew Rick before, but you didn't buy straight away. And then at some point you just felt like you wanted to get that piece specifically. And I think this is something that's super important. I would like Rik and Azuro to comment on this as well, because a lot of artists always feel like, not always, but it does happen to an artist to feel like this collector doesn't like my work, or why does this collector appreciate my work and tell me that they appreciate my work, but they don't buy it, right? And I think apart from, one's personal taste, it can also be a lot about energy, right? You can appreciate something, and then maybe at that specific time when you appreciate it, you just don't feel the energy to want it in your collection. But then maybe a couple of months later, you look at it again and you're like, wow, I need this, right? So I think it's really important for artists as well to understand that it's not just black and white, and that energy and one's personal journey as a collector as well really has an impact on that. I would love for Rik and Azura to.
Yeah, if I can tap into that. Thank you so much for your words, AOI. I look at it the other way around as well. I look at collectors and their energy, which is quite funny. I think that's also how I connected with both of you, AOI and Azuro, where Azuro has a super outspoken taste, which I really admire within this space. Because AOI, what you just mentioned, like there were so many people simply gambling without a purpose almost. Like there was no real connection with the space, and all those people disappeared again. But you guys always stayed true to the artist. And that's something you can tell by looking at a collection as well, because like if they care about art, you notice a taste. You're right, like AOI, I know you love gradients and energy and that kind of vibe. And Azuro loves the more rough, abstract kind of stuff. And as an artist, you look up to that as well. Like I have a couple of collectors, like when looking through their on Cyber, or it was Showtime back in the days where their full collections were listed, I was always curious, what is this person? Because as a collector, you are a brand as well. And I love to see like how the brand AOI is expanding right now, because like in the end, you guys are brands as well. Like you guys have a voice, you guys have an identity here, and that's beautiful to see how that evolves. And I'm curious to hear about Azuro as well. Like, what is your take on that? You have a very outspoken taste, and where does it come from?
To be honest, it's very hard for me to explain why I like a given art piece. It's just, I'm an impulsive person. So I just kind of feel the connection with the piece and the artist. And yeah, I just want to buy it. So 9 out of 10 purchases work that way for me. And yeah, that is exactly why I wrote this thread about artists to properly link to their work, because I don't think I'm the only one who's kind of falling in love momentarily with an art piece. And many artists are losing this opportunity by hiding their links. Like they need to show whatever they have as fast as possible. Yeah, so that's basically it.
Do you have an example how they ideally could do that? Because, for instance, I recently built a link tree. It had a very messy layout. Like for me, I didn't care too much about my pin tweet. I'm always aware of, but the overall links, because there are so many. Like you have Super Rare, you have OpenSea, you have several collections. You have a personal portfolio, you have an Instagram. Like for both of you guys, like AOI, I don't know how you look at that, but what is the best way for an artist to have that properly shown, in your opinion?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if there's many or little, they have to be prioritized. So the most important links have to go first. But I would suggest, yeah, not to put like 10. I've seen like people doing 15 links in their link tree. Yeah, that's kind of distracting. So I would suggest like having 5 important links. Also in Twitter, when you're tapping on someone's account, the website link is not visible, but the bio is. So I would also suggest to add in the bio. So let's say if you are a super rare artist, you're super rare link.
Yes. So one thing to add to that as well is these days, depending on what platform you mint on, I think it is quite important as well, because these days, a lot of these platforms, OpenSea, even some of the aggregators like Gem or Genie, it's quite hard to find artwork and really sort of these pages aren't really designed for particular artists. So I would say that, for example, if I'm collecting particular artists, right, and I go to Linktree and I see, some of these guys, I see they've minted on Object, on Pieces, I've seen them minted on Foundation, I've seen them minted on Super Rare. Sometimes, right, I always gravitate towards Super Rare versus Foundation. Although Foundation has an incredible body of work, but then if that artist jumps from Foundation to Super Rare, the visibility wise of Super Rare is a lot higher. So certain artists I've bought pieces of Foundation, but then as soon as they jump on Super Rare, I'm like, okay, I have to get their Super Rare pieces. Just because being one of the first sort of NFT marketplaces, I think they have the most sort of, if people think, one of ones, rarity and all sort of stuff, people automatically sort of go towards Super Rare. But then artists are now starting to mint on their own contracts as well. So I do think artists minting on their own contracts is amazing. It allows for a lot more sort of programmability and they can do a lot more stuff. But the question is, I always find about, sure, mint your own contract, have amazing thing, but at the same time, what's missing is, how do you discover this artist? Unless the artist is already, famous or whatever, it's a lot easier. But if you're an up-and-coming artist and you're minting your own contract, you still need visibility on your particular piece. And this is where I think platforms like Nifty Gateway, Super Rare, these platforms do allow for more artist visibility. But is it the perfect formula? Probably not. And this is where in the next probably 6 months to a year, right, I feel like the whole sort of artist discovery is going to change. I've looked into a lot of different other platforms that are using AI-powered sort of search engines that will probably redefine how people discover art. And it's similar to like what Behance has done, and I kind of feel like, there are these parallels that are happening in the non-NFT world, right, in the creative design world where, people using Behance, using all these different sort of platforms. I think some of those are going to enter into the world of NFTs. And this is something that I find super interesting. A lot of really talented Instagram photographers, right, will try and get into the NFT space. And although they have, probably 500,000 followers, if their communication or if their social interaction or if they how they interact with the community isn't good on Twitter, then straight away, people can think of it as a cash grab. I'll give you a good example, right? I don't want to throw Timbo, who is listening. I just want to use him as an example, right? I've never purchased. Have I been purchasing a work of piece of yours? I'm not sure, but I do always remember Timbo, right? Because from the very first time he's interacted on Twitter, he's always supporting other artists, right? Other photographers that have collected, right? He's always there in the comments. He's always supporting them. There's a real sort of sense of friendship and camaraderie. That's the energy that I think, in particular, in NFT photography world, it's really quite powerful. And I guess maybe because they're all photographers, they all share the same medium, they're all outside in nature taking drone photography, or they're in the studio. So there's that sense of connection. And when NFT photography first sort of started, people were like, oh, they're just minting a photograph. It's not even art. It's just lazy. It's just. But that's when it changed up, because all of a sudden these guys, right, use sort of their social presence and use sort of their storytelling. I think storytelling is super important as well. And some of these NFT photographers now, right, are almost like lifestyle brands. It's quite incredible. So this space is constantly evolving. And one advice I would say is that, if you're new to the space, get Twitter. Jump on Twitter, search some hashtags, see who the top artists are, artists that inspire you, and, follow them, comment on them, chat with them. And one thing I realized is, artists always want to help artists. And that's where the magic is. And I think going back to, Rik's competition self, that really blew me away. You could really see these artists really understand Rik and really get his vision for what his piece was about, and really take that on and start telling the story of what their own self. And I think we can talk more about this, and I probably shouldn't take too much more time, because I think Rik's going to show us some much more interesting stuff on his computer in a bit. I think, like Rik is, especially the self piece, that is a true sort of energy phenomenon. Of course, the art is amazing, but the energy that it translates across all the social mediums and the effect of that, art that transforms other people and forces them to self-reflect and grow from that and develop. And through that process, enhance their creativity and their own design to create something else. That, to me, is real like alchemy. I think that's the power of NFTs, to combine social aspects, combine design, art, of course, technology as well. And of course, we're using the internet, connect the whole world. That to me is, I think, what makes this space so exciting. So I'll leave it up to you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you again for the words. I do believe in the power of community as well. And I wanted to tap into that like artist versus collector relationship as well, because I've learned so much from my collectors and even from you before you were my collector, right? It's such a team effort to uplift this space. And it's just great. Like if you're not eager to learn or eager to see others succeed, you won't make it, I believe. Like if you're just here with your own agenda and you're not looking for an interaction or to support others, because I see many artists that are really talented, like people, because I've been into this atmosphere for like 18 years. And I've seen so many enter like the NFT space, like old homies of mine who are the most talented lads on earth, but they don't care about social media. They don't care about interacting with people. They don't care about their collectors. They're approaching it. Like I had once, I'm not gonna throw out names here, but I had like one of the people I very much looked up to back in the days, starting out creating, and he mentioned to me like, why are you even saying GM on Twitter? Why do you interact so much? Why do you spend so much time there? Like I simply enjoy it. And he was like, dude, I see this opportunity to make money out of collectors. Like that's the answer he had towards me. Like that was his argument. Like why care about the community? Just make money. And I think with that approach, like you're not going to make it. But yeah, I don't know if I should start my masterclass or that Azuro has something to say about this relationship and how important it is for both sides to get educated. Because I believe like collectors learn from artists as well. But for me, not being a crypto native, for instance, like my first collector ever, who's the Austrian Tibike, he taught me so much and he helped me along the side. And ever since he purchased my Genesis on Super Rare, every single step I've done in this space, I touched base with him before I did it. And without him, I wouldn't have been here, literally. So that's the beauty of the space as well. And I sold my first piece because of a retweet of an artist. That's like how it goes. And that's how organic growth, like you can't force it. Just be yourself and then be your own brand. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I would love for Azura to touch on that. And I think it's also important that we, exactly for what you're saying, Rick, we remind, artists and their brands are kind of the same thing, right? So as an artist, the values that you're giving about your art and the brand that you have around your art are also yourself. So if you're not yourself in the first place and you don't show yourself like the real you as well, your brand is also going to be affected by that, right? And it's going to be also confusing perhaps for collectors to be like, okay, I'm buying this work or I want to buy this work, but who's this person? And what does this piece say about this person if you're not out there showing yourself, right? Azura, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think a personal relationship plays a big role. So whenever there's opportunity to connect with the collector, it's a great idea. Also, for myself, like the biggest influence of making the decision to buy is recommendation of someone I respect. That could be an artist or another collector, but I mean, everything in this world works. You hear from someone who you trust, you respect, and that influences your decisions. So yeah, I totally support the idea of communicating with fellow artists and collectors. That's the way to go.
I've been observing the chat and the community is coming up with some pretty amazing questions. So I'm going to jump in and just pull out a few of them. So we've got, what is it for Rick? What is it that triggers your evolution? Aside the constant growth, what is it that you look to unlock doing art that you haven't yet? And what was it also like for you to advance from one form to the other, progressing in your journey and the challenges faced?
This question embodies everything, literally, what I do. Maybe I can even start screen sharing to answer that one, because I opened some websites, tabs to walk you through what I've been up to and especially decision making. I have to say, like, the one goal is total artistic freedom to express myself the way I want to without like any regrets or second thoughts, to be able to express myself through multiple mediums, to inspire people, especially on the educational aspect. If you look at high schools and stuff like that, where art teachers still teach people to paint with charcoal, for instance, instead of like, hey, look at this, we have an iPad, we can do Procreate, or we can download this program called Blender. It's free. You can play around with that and trigger people to create in a modern kind of way. I still think there's lots of wiggle room to achieve there. But overall, it's just self-expression, sort of like therapeutic, meditational. I wouldn't say habit. It's really a passion for me. Like I currently... The first time my girlfriend wanted to have a relationship with me 12 years ago. And I said, sorry, but you have to realize that Photoshop will always be my number one. So that shows how much I care about creating art, digital art, and even my kid. Should I share my screen? Because that's actually, I'll do it right now. Do you see it?
Awesome. Yeah. Yes.
Can you see my screen? Okay. And maybe I have to zoom in a little bit. So yeah, my journey actually started with this piece. And as you can see, it's like the 12th of August, 2004, which is more than 18 years ago, actually. So I kind of found this platform called DeviantArt, which was a big percentage of the internet. And you saw that I was just having fun without much like concept behind it. It was quite easy. It was all very one-layered work. But I was expressing myself. I wasn't the easiest kid, I would say. For my parents, I was smoking lots of weed. Sorry for that. Never used drugs, people. But I did back in the days. I couldn't really express myself. So I went through like therapy, like many therapists, medication, and blah, blah, to get me on track. And then I discovered art. And what you saw here is that like everything that I made had more feedback. So there are like actually comments from like 2004 from Expansion Design. I don't know who this is, by the way. I just stumbled upon it. But the cool thing was that there was a scene, right? Like nobody understood in my neighborhood or in my town whatever I was up to, but there was this online community behind it. And there were no tutorials back then. So the way I learned was more by observing how others did it. Like just observe and educate yourself that way and just express myself in new ways. So like constantly looking for evolving, like what do I like? Like it's sort of like finding your own identity sort of thing, like you do as a human being as well. So that really connects with my work. And you see like how the organic constrictions and line works. And I wasn't too strong on colors. I have to admit, this looks fairly boring, but you saw like this was what I did. And I skipped all my school classes to just create because that was, I wouldn't say calling because that sounds pretty deep, but I enjoyed every bit of it and then went through like just exploring from like stock photo images. This was the first time I ever got a feature on a website. And you can see like 409 people liked this piece and I had 100 comments and it's 14,000 views actually. So that really triggered something in me, like this entire digital world around me that I couldn't find, say in my neighborhood. I come from a pretty small town with like 80 or 70,000 people or so. This is basically how I started to evolve, like from in a personal way, like kind of finding my jam. And I really enjoyed myself exploring. You can even see like photography. It's not the best photography, but I just threw it out there. I threw everything out there, like working with stock photos and stock images. But you already see like a sense of color there that I somehow like always resonated with. You see kind of moody pieces. I even see a black and white one out there, but it's just about trying, testing the waters. Like, what do I like? Because like, if you don't try it, you never know if you like it or not. But if you decide to not like something, at least you get a step closer to what you actually like doing. So evolving from that community into like, and that community took really place on like MSN Messenger. I would almost say like more the MSN Messenger days. Then you had Behance, like the platform from Adobe, where you could post your work in a more, you could present it in a more professional way. So you can make like an entire presentation. You can make multiple works out of that. Okay, this is very low resolution. Imagine how much the resolution grew over the years. But yeah, this community already got a little less personal, I would say, and more professional and super serious. So yeah, from Behance, I didn't vibe with too much, but then I started to use my Instagram as a sort of like creative outlet. And as you can see, if I scroll up here, like it initially started as just exploring. I touched upon 3D software because my background is more in Photoshop. So from Photoshop, I wanted to be able to scale my work as well, right? Like because Photoshop is pixel-based. So you can see here where I started to play with vector kind of stuff, where it's more like it's scalable. And still you see those organic forms. And actually, like you see so many iterations already of the piece self I did that remind me of this body of work, like looking for identity, like personal layers, like what defines you, who are you? And I tried to explore it within 3D as well. It was just a natural transition to me. And I never want to be that artist that will be repetitive for the rest of his life. And I landed my first commercial job was with Volkswagen while I was 18. And from that moment on, like people really hired me for stock photos and stuff like that. And I really want to move away from that. So this is kind of like an exploration phase where I just took like all the time off and I didn't really post much client work online, I would say, and sometimes a rare selfie. And you see kind of like how everything grows. And I'm super thankful that I did this on Instagram, almost like a sketchbook sort of approach where I could just post it isn't as forced as people did. Like I create one image a day. I was just like vibing and sharing, and I noticed like the engagement you got, but it wasn't as intimate, the ecosystem, like it was on DeviantArt, for example, where it was just creatives and creatives, and it was more on my own, like within a tunnel vision, sort of like, okay, I was just doing my own thing, I was exploring my own thing. But yeah, again, like how to survive from that, right? How to survive in a way that you can be yourself, create your own personal work, and make money through that, which was interesting. And especially that took really off when, and then especially referring back to my project Arcus, which got lots of love on all the platforms I was just talking about. So DeviantArt, Behance, and also from the community. People were inspired by it. People were making tutorials about like, how did this guy do it? Because we were already into the tutorial time. And it was like, this project took off like crazy, unlocked a whole new side for myself, where I could show this a little bit, from like a skyscraper in Chicago. And all of a sudden, people booked me for this kind of work where I was simply being myself and able to make money, right? Like this was my baby playing there on the other side of the world. And I came up with this stuff. And that was just so much of an eye opener. So from that moment on, I really focused on personal work mainly. So yeah.
Sorry, I was going to take advantage of that little break to a question from the community by you that sort of ties into this. In your progress, what was the importance of editions, like having editions rather than posting single pieces in, let's say, the growth of your work, but also maybe your notoriety?
How do you mean editions? Because I never did editions on the blog. You mean more working in series?
Yeah, probably. The community member mentioned edition, and Mustafa, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's talking about series, yes.
Yeah, so what I noticed is that you can sort of own something, like focusing on a specific style. For instance, what I did with Arcus out here would really pave the way for me, both in the commercial world, also on my Instagram growth, but also within my NFT spectrum, is that you can build something unique to inspire. Like this was the first image I did, and I could have left it that way. I could have said, okay, this is everything. But I like to explore further and see how a system around that will work. Like I always feel that once working within a series, you can own something, right? And what happened actually, like this wasn't the best occasion of my life, but I don't know if you guys can see this clearly, but Apple launched this wallpaper. You see on the left, I don't know if you guys see my cursor. So Apple launched this wallpaper. They announced a new iMac, and this was wallpaper. What happened? My entire community started to congratulate me for this gig, right? And I was like, I didn't do this. So what happened was that started a chain reaction towards like Apple's laziness, not willing to hire the real artists, but just buying a cheap rip-off stock photo. So people saw me through this artistic language. So that was quite interesting for me. But yeah, does that make sense?
I'm just surprised that's how it went. So you were not told that your work was going to be used?
It wasn't my work. It was someone being inspired, selling it for
they were trying
to imitate whatever I was up to and whatever made my career took off, because it was clearly successful within the artistic community. And people got inspired, and they could blindly upload a stock photo that looked like my work, and people still identified me with it. It's also about building a signature. I think like once I started to build out this brand, people notice right now, oh yeah, that's from Xiaomi, the Chinese phone brand. They saw this me accusing Apple, like, hey, Apple, you lazy people, to say it nicely. You guys simply use a stock photo based on my work and promote your new machine with $100 artwork. And you could have hired the actual artist. So what Xiaomi did, because they were clearly competing with Apple, like they flew me in. I had a great time there. But the main thing they wanted is showing that they care about artists. And their entire brand still is quite built around the signature I've built for them. So even if you look at their newest phone and TV launches, you can still sense this sort of style, because I was the first Western so-called artist they hired. So that was a dope experience.
As soon as people copy you and you're still being identified with the work, it means you're a master, right? I mean, you've moved into a different category.
But those were also the darkest moments for me personally, because I was like, okay, where do I do this for? Of course, I looked up to I had a dream gig, which was being on the background of an Apple machine one day. And then all of a sudden it happens this way. And people still identify me that way, but you never got the credit for it. So that's also something which I find really interesting about the NFT space, because that's sort of what I was looking for, right?
I think it really shows the support of the community in that sense, because it's an innovative way. I mean, as humans, it shouldn't be that new, but coming from platforms like Instagram, who are not community friendly, having like NFT space and the NFT community on Twitter, and seeing how supportive it is, it really does create a safe space for you as well. Like I would even say like an army of people that are ready to like protect you if something
It's the
happens.
power of community in the end, and that's so powerful. And this situation escalated even further once, like Hyundai, with the same stock photos, they won the biggest prestigious advertising award. So yeah, I mean, like I was in touch with the award, like the people who organized the event, and like that was really the first time I was like literally in tears about like, holy shit, like this is so unfair. Because being in advertising, the one thing you want to win is like a Cannes Lion. I mean, that's the biggest reward. By this, I thought like, okay, my work has a use case for brands as well, like in my personal kind of body of work. So I started to focus on that instead of like, that's also the reason why I barely post commercial work online, because I want those agencies to see my personal work. So they hire me for whatever I end up loving to do. For instance, this is the piece Azuro actually collected. So Xiaomi hit me up once more, like, hey, Rick, we love this image. Could we license it for our big ass TV we're going to launch? So that kind of became my earning money model by just licensing deals. So that's sort of like how my commercial evolved, from being sort of like finalizing sketches from agencies into more or less being myself and selling my own work that way. So should I continue screen sharing, or do we take a little break for some questions?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on this. I think it's incredibly powerful that you showed us everything since the beginning, even the pieces that right now you're like, oh, why did I make that? Or you can see that it was like the early stages of your career. And I think it's a very powerful thing to show to artists who are now starting. And there's a lot of people in the Discord server just now who have been asking about, you know, what to do because they just started in the space or they just started their artistic career, right? And so it's incredibly inspiring to see everything you've been through in terms of like your artistic career and I mean, personal as well. And thank you for sharing that as well. I had a really great feeling when you showed us your work in that space. I can't remember what space it was again that you said before. And you were mentioning that that was like one of the first times where you kind of realized that you could focus on personal work, you could do what you wanted to create, and you weren't necessarily dependent on commission or someone telling you like, this is what you have to do. And that didn't necessarily align with your vision and with your creative process. And so I had like such a great feeling when you showed us that, and you're like, this is when I realized that I could do what I wanted to do and continue. And obviously it's something that you worked very hard for, but I also want to remind artists that there is a lot of hard work that goes beyond that. It takes a lot of patience, right? It's not something you can expect to reach like straight away. And it's also good for us to touch a little bit on privilege as well, because there's a lot of privilege that comes from, not saying that this is about like your career at all, but there are certain people who have to work a little harder to get to a certain level. But at the end of the day, what I personally would like artists to understand is that if you're patient and you keep working and you have a clear vision of what you want to do and where you want to go, you will be able to make it, right? You will be able to create that reality for yourself. Yes, I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, but I totally agree. Like success doesn't come overnight and it takes hours. Like within 18 years, there hasn't been a day that I didn't spend like hours, or even if you're just thinking about it, right? Like you're still working or you're still trying to evolve. And I think it's pretty important to figure out who you really are. I mean, that helped me a lot. Like I'm going to jump onto the process of self right now. But it helped me personally a lot to figure out like, who am I, who I want to be? Because like I'm 33 years old now, and there kind of comes a pressure. Like you start off by just being an art enthusiast, right? And all of a sudden I had to make money out of it, which was a blessing. Like I really felt it was a blessing. But in the end, even like I recently, I did a campaign with Ray-Ban last year, and my father is super proud. Like, oh my God, Rick, you did it, and blah, blah, blah. But like, I didn't feel anything doing that, right? Like I was just losing my soul step by step within that project, because you get hired by this amazing brand. And I think I even spoke with AOI about that. Like, yo, I got this opportunity. Should I do it? And the gut said actually no, but many people said yes. And it was a bucket list experience for me. Like it was a dream for me to do this campaign. So this campaign, it always starts off like, Rick, you can do whatever you like. We love your color choice. We love your form choice. Please be you. We hire you for you. And what happened, like a week later on, I'm not allowed to say this, actually. I might get sued when I say it, but they said, like, you can only use red and blue. And I'm like, what? Like, one, like, that's not a contrast I use often. And two, you hired me for a beautiful color. So that's how it went in the commercial world. And the thing with NFTs right now is that I can truly explore, like myself, what do I want? Like, go back to that core. If you look at by the birth of my son, sort of, which also loops back to self. We had a kid in January 21. I've worked my ass off the 9 months of the pregnancy of my girlfriend. I basically was either out there being social because I thought my life might be over, or I was working. So I was planning to do a sabbatical, actually, like a sabbatical year. And what happened? Our kid was born, but our kid needed a card. And the cool thing was that for the first time in, I think, 2 years or something like that, I was not focusing on the 3D realm of it, of the work, but I was like, okay, let's play with just forms. Let's just draw. And actually, this one started in the hospital, which is weird, but you can see how much this influenced the process of self in a sense that it's forms, it's colors, there's patterns, but it's like a drawing again. Like it was just something different I didn't do for like 2 years. And yeah, then you ask me, why do you show this photo? Like on the right is actually Ruben Wu, which is one of my most favorite artists and became a good friend of mine as well. But if you look at the shoes, the first pair of shoes I bought after our son was born were those like Yeezys. But the sketch of self was actually made exactly a month after our son was born, being my first. I was just taking it easy. I was just not rushing anything. I was mainly home. And then this happened. And this piece, yeah, was special for me. And it wasn't until September 8th that I sort of shared it. So that was actually months after I created it. But I was like, it's still in the back of my head. I should pick it up. And it's a moment where I somehow wanted to show that not everything I create is perfect. Also, that perfection doesn't exist. And at the same time, also educate people what is behind a JPEG, right? Like it's always, oh yeah, they're throwing money at JPEGs and blah, blah, blah. It's always that kind of conception where I'm not sure if everyone understands what goes like on behind that simple image. So what I decided to do is to put on my more vulnerable side and explore by sharing the process, like my decision making.
I think that we can take a little second to ask AOI as well. What drew you into buying this piece specifically? And were you following this process before you bought the piece?
Definitely. I think this piece really embodies the spirit and soul of Rick. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different variations of it. And one of the things that Rick and I talked about in one of the first calls was his son, and children, especially babies, right, are so pure. When they experience in the beginning, they don't get to experience color, but shapes and forms and details. And, we were talking about the idea of even creating like a baby sort of NFT project. How do you use color and form to evoke emotion in a child? And at that moment, I remember we were doing, a call, and Rick would be like, yeah, like certain designs I make, my child really likes it. And I think that aspect is something that transcends just color and line work. People can follow a book and they can follow a particular sort of guide on how to create this, but to experience these forms and these lines and these colors and fuse it together in a way which evokes some sort of emotional response, but then doing it 100 times, which you see in Self and Rick, right? It shows different facets of his personality, different facets of his soul, different moments in time of his journey. And I think that is what drove me to Self. I was like, this is an absolute masterpiece. And one thing I was saying earlier was that the competition that Rick's doing, right? When I first saw all the entries that were coming in, I was like, oh my God, this is a movement. This is something that transcends art. And a lot of the people that are creating these renditions of Self, they're pouring their heart and soul out. People are writing threads on what this piece means to them. And then when an artist has this effect and the artwork has this power to connect, to unravel, and to make people self-reflect, all these images in front of us. Like that's me, like almost brings tears in my eyes. I'm just so deeply moved by this. And yeah, like when Rick was saying, I was almost certain that I wouldn't be able to get this piece. But yeah, I definitely got lucky because Rick had some really, really strong collectors, and another collector wanted it. But luckily, he was on holidays, or he was away from
In Disneyland.
So
He was in Disneyland.
yeah. And that's another thing as well. Collecting art is about, in a way, being in the right place in the right moment, meeting the right people. There's a little bit of fate involved, and the notion of creativity, the notion of, oh wow, look at this piece. Like this is the competition that's done out on Twitter, which blows my mind. I don't think I've seen any competition that has this level of design or thought of. There's another artist called TJO, recently he did his blue piece, right? And that was another one that, a lot of artists were creating pieces that were blue, right? But this is on another level. This is not just creating a rendition in blue or look at this guy, this is a work on another level. And this is where I think, the community that Rick has built from years of doing his art and evolving and growing, the people that have followed him, the people that have learned from him, you can see it. These are people that have been following Rick or learning from him from day one. And every one of these challenges helps raise awareness for these artists. But most of all, I think this is an exercise of bettering that person's soul. Like this is just mind blowing.
Yeah, it surprised me as well, like how much this means to me personally, because it started more as just like an experiment. And I think, AOI, about the rug I did with David as well, like the actual rug. Like I'm not rugging people in Web3, but we did this actual rug collaboration. I was like, wow. And this guy was so happy that he could play with my work, like because we touched base, because I was a fan of his work, but I found out that he was using my wallpapers for about 4 years already, like on all his devices. I was like, whoa, bro, we should collaborate one day. And that really sparked this idea. And like, I never thought this would happen to me personally, because I've been struggling with this project and it wasn't always the best experience, but I noticed that perfection in art doesn't exist. And sometimes you need to let go to evolve, but this process has brought me so much. And this literally tops it off above like, AOI, I love you for collecting it. But seeing what other people do, it's just like, wow, this is the power of Web3. This is community to me, like seeing those iterations, like how people take it by heart. And that really means that people find it legit what I do. And of course, that by likes or by follows or by sales, but this is real. Like I literally was in tears with one submission. I told you about that as well, AOI, like, wow, this blows my mind. And I'm curious because I got the tab open right here. How many downloads of the source file? 579 people downloaded the source file. So I'm pretty excited to see where this goes, because it only runs for like not even 4 days today. And there's still 10 days left. And I'm so excited where to take this, and especially like the collaborative approach, which is the best thing about this space. It's not only like collector and artist, but it's also in Instagram, you were in a tunnel vision, mainly following the same kind of persons. And right now you have so many intersections happening with, I follow beautiful photography. Like the thing I collect most is photography. And I would have never thought that because I was never really following creative photographers, right? And on Twitter, like I stumble upon all those amazing talents, and I'm just mind blown, like how collaboration can uplift two parties and how to make new magic happen, basically.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And I think also I wanted to add that people in your community really look up on you, and the fact that you're providing them a way of working and creating with your own work, I think it's something that's so generous from an artist of your level. And it's not that usual either. So what you're doing is incredible for your community, and actually you're setting an example for other big artists in the space as well to do the same and be more and more open to share their work with the community and help others to become better artists. Because as you were saying before, this is also like about doing an exercise, and you're downloading this piece of art and then you're making something new. And maybe it's not going to be the work of your life, but it's still going to be an exercise for you to become a better artist and to push yourself against like the boundaries that maybe you have done to yourself to begin with, right? So really, really an amazing project.
Exactly that. But it's amazing, because it makes people feel uncomfortable as well. So they're really themselves, like how to deal with this, like how can I make this my own? And also because there's not really a limit, but there's still a limit to sort of reference the OG. So that's really interesting how all those entries shape up.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you to share a little bit about what's going to happen with the competition.
Yeah, this is some alpha info out here. Someone I met in Web3 who became a friend of mine asked me like, hey, Rick, I really like what you're doing. So should we do an exhibition around it? Like feature at least like 40 artworks out of this competition in a real life gallery? Because I believe in taking like the Web3 community, like bring them together in a real life atmosphere. And yeah, just celebrate this act of collaboration together. And I know not everyone is gonna book plane tickets right now to come to Amsterdam. I know that's unrealistic, but at least as a thank you also towards all those artists that put in their blood, sweat, and tears to not just highlight 3 artists that will get a prize and be selected by our judges, but also give them a little bit extra what they deserve for putting in all this energy into this competition.
That's great. And I think that also a little aligns with what AOI is doing in terms of trying to reconnect the Web3 with the traditional space and kind of like providing a physical space to Web3. Do you want to add something on that, AOI?
No, definitely. Like I was just saying, like maybe we do another exhibition in another city. I think what your credit said before, it's really a really powerful movement. It's art that connects back to a person's soul. It connects back to their livelihood. Like there's something, I honestly think, where we're tapping on the surface and there is a higher calling for this self project. I'm not sure what it is, but I think, we should keep discussing and brainstorming. And I think there could be something massive to come out of this.
Yeah, and thank you so much once again. And yeah, I think it went so organic in a way that I never even used like sharing the process as like a promotional with like an effort, like marketing idea behind it. But the organic growth, how this expands from like, hey, bro, let's make a rug together into like finishing this artwork and sharing the entire process open to like sharing the source files and now bringing it to the real life as well. It's just amazing like how organic that went. And it's all because of like the community. There's nothing forced behind it. It's pure. It's human. And that's like unbelievable.
And that's funny because that's exactly what we were talking about before this call. I actually told you, like, when AOI collected the piece, I already knew it, but most importantly, like what I actually remembered, what was this whole process, this thread that you posted. And that's when I asked you, like, was this like a thought marketing strategy or what was it? And you were like, no, it's actually, I didn't really think about it as a marketing strategy. It's literally organic growth, right? It's the organic community engagement.
And it was therapeutic for me. It was therapeutic for me because like, yeah, I've been, ever since I knew I was becoming a father, like I've been going to a therapist again, almost talking like on a weekly basis to just like I wanted to be a good father, but for that like you also sort of need to love yourself or be yourself. I really started to work on that and that really changed me. And by showing this fragile side of mine online, like not the Mr. Perfect whatever I create, almost like everything I create is awesome kind of guy, but more like, hey, I'm human and I want to take you through the thinking and the issues I'm going through while creating as well. Like sometimes I wanted to give up on this piece as well. I started it from zero like 40 times or something like that. It's crazy. But this process has been so personal to me and it's nice like how it connects on a personal level with other people as well. And even like AOI, he feels it. That's amazing, right? Like if someone can resonate and understand the piece without me telling the backstory behind it, because I never really was diving too much into the details, like what it meant to me personally, but it already told by the process and everything. And that's amazing.
Rick, I've got a question for you. Let's talk about your work. Do you think that the fact that we're showing it in Web3, with Web3, through Web3 has changed or has influenced the way you work?
Oh, definitely. It's mostly mentally. From my own POV, Web3 made me feel like an artist. And that's really weird because I never felt that way. I was a tool for brands to make their stuff look cool. But that perspective changed a lot. And I think many of us have that. And what I see now is that many artists are really like exploring themselves, are really going back to the core. And then I'm talking artists that have been doing this for 20 years, for instance. They really go back to that core because we all evolved into this like sort of hybrid, like, yes, we can do our own thing, but no, we can't totally be that because otherwise clients don't want to work with us and we'll end up living under a bridge, right? But I could be wrong because I thought like when COVID happened that the best music ever would be released, but the music industry barely changed, although I was expecting like all musicians to lock themselves up in studios. But I think it's the beginning. It's just a matter of onboarding those real life people and getting to display it properly to the normies, so saying.
I think if I can add on that, I think it makes sense that once you get into a certain space or you're starting to not just sell your work in a certain space, in this case Web3, but also you're also seeing every day you're exposed to new and evolved types of art. So you're inevitably affected, like your art inevitably gets influenced by that as well, right? So I assume that there's a certain extent to which you see an artwork and it's a very subconscious process, but you do get influenced in your next artwork, right? Even if you're at that point, you wouldn't be able to say like, oh, this is the artwork that inspired me, but you know that probably you've seen something and you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of like, you know?
Yeah. And all this inspiration comes from online right now, where I usually had to take it. Like Instagram was kind of boring because I kept on seeing the same stuff. So usually I had to take inspiration from real life, like the physical world. And right now I notice that I get fairly inspired by photography and the way people capture things and treat their colors or even change their colors out, like a sort of like weird vision they have on reality. And I really like that. And that's something I'm clearly going to build upon like the next month.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And I think we pretty much covered everything we wanted to discuss as well.
Nice. The one thing you would say to artists, just in general, is a question from 4 to you, Rick. Maybe we can close with that. What's your one message?
Ooh, there are so many.
I can touch on that. Something that we talked about, which I think connects really well, which is how to make sales isn't the issue. It's about how to have a unique voice.
Yeah, and make sure you're happy with what you do and find your own jam. Like never stop exploring in that sense, I feel. Never get too comfortable. Don't fall for trends or whatever. Like I could have started to make glitch art nowadays as well because Xcopy does it and Xcopy is great at that. But I see many artists doing that, for instance, like they bend for a trend. And I would just make sure to really define yourself like as a human being, and then you can also do that as an artist, I feel. And I think that process goes quite hand in hand. To me, at least for me it did personally, but I can't judge that if that's for everyone.
Yeah, I think we can close this session for today. I want to thank everyone who is in the Discord server for being there, asking questions. And I do want to really thank Rick for being here, AOI and Letitia, and Joe as well, who's been sharing the screen for us today. Thanks everyone for being here today. It's been so great.